Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. Might be a bit of a shorter one today, but we'll do the Psalms and Proverbs. Psalm 126, verses 1 through 6. When the Lord restored the well-being of Zion, we thought we were dreaming. At that time we laughed loudly and shouted for joy. At that time the nation said, "The Lord has accomplished great things for these people." The Lord did indeed accomplish great things for us. We were happy. O Lord, restore our well-being, just as the streams in the arid south are replenished. Those who shed tears as they plant will shout for joy when they reap the harvest. The one who weeps as he walks along, carrying his bag of seed, will certainly come in with a shout of joy, carrying his sheaves of grain. Yeah. So two pictures here of Israel demolished, then restored, and of one who was planting, I guess, grain. And the whole picture is one of restoration. And so, and I guess to me the question then becomes, how does this picture of planting and harvesting seed be a picture of restoration? And I think that's answered in the Gospels, where you have Jesus talking about the parable of the sower, and the sower sowing seed on different kinds of ground. The seed being essentially the Word of God that is either grown up successfully in the hearer's heart, or is plucked away or choked out by some foreign influence. So I think this picture of desolation and restoration, and this picture of planting and harvesting, is a picture generally of restoration. Yeah. And it's interesting too, you have this promise of a harvest there. The one who weeps, in verse 6, as he walks along, carrying his bag of seed, will certainly come in with a shout of joy, carrying his sheaves of grain. That is, this spreading of the word is not in vain type thing. From Guzik here. This psalm is titled A Song of Ascents. It is the 7th in the series of 15 songs for pilgrims coming to Jerusalem. This song likely was composed after the exile, in wondrous gratitude for God's restoration, and in prayer for a furtherance of that work. When the Lord brought back the captivity of Zion, the psalmist sang of a time when God set his people free from their captivity, and they were restored to Jerusalem. Most associate this with the return from exile under Ezra and Nehemiah, but it is also possible that it describes David's return from his brief exile from Jerusalem in Absalom's coup. As one of the Song of Ascents, we imagine these words in the mouths of the pilgrims on the way to, or having arrived at, Jerusalem. Perhaps they considered their seasons away from Jerusalem as symbolic captivity, and they celebrated the larger return from exile in their current personal experience of such. We were like those who dream. With power and beauty, the poet described the sense of happy, grateful astonishment at the power and goodness of God in bringing back his people from the captivity of Zion. It seemed too good, too great to be true, but it was true. We could not believe our own eyes and ears, but thought it to be but a dream, or delusion of our fancies, as is usual in matters of great joy. From Poole. And he cites Genesis 45:26. And they told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. The people knew about the promises of restoration, but when the actual moment of restoration came, it was an overwhelming experience. They were like those who dreamed. It all happened too quickly and seemed like a mirage, from Van Gemeren. It remained a vivid national memory. The lively paraphrase in today's English version, it was like a dream, how we laughed, how we sang for joy, how happy we were, as inspiring as the outbreaks of revival in the Christian church, from Kidner. Then our mouth was filled with laughter. They celebrated God's amazing work with laughter and singing. There was so much laughing that their mouth was filled with it. The mercy was so unexpected, so amazing, so singular, that they could not do less than laugh, and they laughed much, so that their mouths were full of it, and that because their hearts were full too. From Spurgeon. We must raise up ourselves with this consideration, that the gospel is nothing else but laughter and joy. This joy properly pertaineth to captives, that is, to those that feel the captivity of sin and death. These are the disciples in whose hearts should be planted laughter and joy, and that by the authority of the Holy Ghost, which this verse setteth forth. From Luther. Those who most readily feel the sting of the problem will be most happy at the solution. And conversely, if you don't think you have a problem, then you won't want the solution. I look at Ray Comfort's analogy to this, in that he was saying how a doctor presents a cancer treatment to a patient. He has to first say that they have cancer, that they're going to die, and otherwise, if they don't get the treatment, then they will most certainly die. But if he just presents the treatment without the problem, then the patient will refuse. He's like, what? You want to inject me with all sorts of radioactive material? That's insane. I don't want that type thing. So it's important that we recognize that we're sinners, and that we all fall short of God's righteous standard. And only when we recognize that can the cure then come in, that God made a way for sinners to be right with him, that is, by the sacrifice of his Son on the cross, so that through his sacrifice being perfect, we could have a right relationship with God, because Jesus serves as our atoning sacrifice. He takes the penalty that was meant for us and takes it on himself. And if we believe on him, then we'll be saved. The Lord has done great things for them. The sense of joyful amazement was not confined to the people of God. Onlooking nations had to proclaim that the work belonged to Yahweh, and that the work was truly great. The liberty now granted was brought about in so extraordinary a way that the very heathens saw that the hand of the great Jehovah must have been in it. From Clark. These foreigners were no dreamers, though they were only lookers-on, and no partakers in this surprising mercy. They plainly saw what had been done, and rightly ascribed it to the great giver of all good. From Spurgeon. The Lord has done great things for us. The singer heard what the nation said, agreed with it, emphasized it with a repetition, and personalized it. It became the declaration of what God has done for us. Their reluctant acknowledgement is caught up triumphantly by the singer. He, as it were, thanks the Gentiles for teaching him that word. From Maclaren. And we are glad. There is a joyful peace in the declaration. This is not a worked up, hyped up enthusiasm. This was the confident joy in what God had done, simply to declare, we are glad. Bring back our captivity, O Lord. The second half of this psalm does not deny the amazed joy of the first half, but it recognizes that there is still work yet to be done. The returning exiles under Ezra or David realized there was much work yet to do, and the restoration had only yet begun. So the song is a cry for more complete restoration for Morgan. We may imagine the sense of one whose life is profoundly changed by Jesus Christ. They are grateful and amazed at what he has done, yet can in the next moment consider how much more needs to be done. For the psalmist, as for us, memory of the past could have become mere nostalgia. Those were the days, we say, wonderful, but gone forever. In Psalm 126, the memory of those singing, laughter-filled days of the past becomes not nostalgia, but the ground of a strong hope for even better days to come. From Boise. As the streams in the south flowed when the rain fell in faraway mountains. Those streams could appear suddenly and rush with a mighty flow, sometimes known as flash floods. The psalmist prayed for a mighty sudden work of God to further the work of restoration among his people. To the south of favored Judea stretched the dry and barren district, where in summertime all the streams ceased to flow. That, to the singer, was the condition of the people. But in the autumn the rains filled up the stony channels, a very river of life. From Morgan. There are few transformations more dramatic than that of a dry gully into a torrent. Such can be the effect of a downpour, which can also turn the surrounding desert into a place of grass and flowers overnight. From Kidner. Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. The gladness of the first half of this psalm was real, but only part of the picture. With wisdom, the psalmist reminded himself, and all of us, that great joy is often preceded by a season of tears, as if they are seeds we sow that will bring a crop of joy to be later reaped. In the first image, the sudden filling of the desert streams, the results are sudden and unearned. In the second image, the harvest after the difficult work of plowing and sowing seed, the results come only after a long period of hard work and waiting. From Boise. The two images of renewal are not only striking, they are complementary. The first of them is all suddenness, a sheer gift from heaven. The second is slow and arduous, with man allotted a crucial part to play in it. From Kidner. This illustration puts a connection between the tears and the joy. We want to reap the joy without ever having sown the tears. F.B. Meyer noted that some farmers steep their seeds before sowing them, and then applied the idea. It is well when Christian workers steep their lessons and addresses with their prayers and tears. It is not enough to sow. We may do that lavishly and constantly, but we must add passion, emotion, tender pity, strong cryings and tears. From Spurgeon, he drops a seed and a tear, a seed and a tear, and so goes on his way. In his basket he has seed which is precious to him, for he has little of it, and it is his hope for the next year. Each grain leaves his hand with anxious prayer that it may not be lost. He thinks little of himself, but much of his seed, and he eagerly asks, "Will it prosper? Shall I receive a reward for my labor? Yes, doubtless you will. Gather sheaves from your sowing." He who continually goes forth weeping, bearing seed for sowing. The idea is repeated and enlarged. Those who have endured much weeping, if they truly carry it as seed for sowing, holding and casting it with faith in God and in his promise, those may be assured of reaping a good harvest. The people were not to sit by idly, waiting for God to come through. They had to go out and sow, praying that the Lord would be true. The phrase seed to sow is reminiscent of Haggai's encouragement to the people to sow whatever little they had left, because the Lord will bless them. From Van Gemeren. Both the going forth and the coming home are stressed by a doubling of the verb, and might be translated, "He that surely go forth weeping will surely come home with shouts of joy." From Kidner. Shall doubtless come again with rejoicing. Tears truly sown in faith will bring in time a true harvest of rejoicing, as if the reapers held heavy sheaves of grain. This is a powerful and great promise that our tears and sorrows need not be wasted, but can be sown for a joyful harvest received in a better season. Because the Lord has written, doubtless, take heed that you do not doubt. No reason for doubt can remain after the Lord has spoken. From Spurgeon. In the joy of the present pilgrim gathering, we sense the singers enjoying that harvest, yet wisely understanding that there will be future tears to sow in faith. From Horn, O disciple of Jesus, behold an emblem of thy present labor, and thy future reward. Thou sowest, perhaps, in tears. Thou doest thy duty amidst persecution and affliction, sickness, pain, and sorrow. Thou laborest in the church, and no account is made of thy labors. No profit seems to arise from them. Yet the day is coming when thou shalt reap in joy, and plentiful shall be thy harvest. He guards the buried seed, and stands sponsor for the harvest. No sigh, no tear, no prayer, inspired by the Spirit of God, can positively be lost or unproductive. Like your Lord, you shall yet see the travail of your soul, and be satisfied. From Mayor. Alexander Maclaren wondered how much encouragement and strength have been drawn for centuries from the sweet words of this psalm. Who can tell how many hearts they have braced, how much patient toil they have inspired? The psalmist was sowing seed, the fruit of which he little dreamed of when he wrote them, and his sheaves will be an exceeding weight indeed. For thus thy blessed master went forth weeping, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief, bearing precious seed, and sowing it around him, till at length his own body was buried, like a grain of wheat, in the furrow of the grave. But he arose, and is now in heaven, from whence he shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, with the voice of the archangel and the trump of God, bringing his sheaves with him. From Horn. Yeah, and I think it's important, too, that we not get discouraged, period. That we not get discouraged with doing good and preaching the gospel and serving in the body of Christ and encouraging one another. I think sometimes it can be a long time until the harvest, and we don't necessarily even see the harvest if we're not the one there. The harvest being the positive effect that was had by what we did. But I think it's important here in verse 6, the one who weeps as he walks along carrying his bag of seed will certainly come in with a shout of joy, carrying his sheaves of grain. That's a promise that the work isn't in vain. And it's a promise to me similar to that of in the prophet Isaiah, where you have, as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there without watering the earth and causing it to bear and sprout, so will my word be which goes forth from my mouth. It won't return void, type thing. So, important not to get discouraged. Finally, Proverbs 16, verses 26 and 27. A laborer's appetite works on his behalf, for his hunger urges him to work. A wicked scoundrel digs up evil, and his slander is like a scorching fire. Yeah, for the laborer, being hungry inspires him to continue on, to do his work so that he can receive the food that he wants. And for the second proverb, a wicked scoundrel digs up evil, it reminds me of other proverbs where you have the evil man inventing new kinds of evil. That is, he doesn't let the evil lie in the ground, but actively seeks to dig it up, to use it for his own evil intent. From Guzik, the person who labors for himself. The Bible recognizes the principle of personal property, and that the reward of work properly belongs to the worker. This argues against schemes of forced communal living, either on a small or national scale. It also argues against excessive taxation because it does not say the person who labors for his government. For his hungry mouth drives him on. When people are rewarded with the benefit of their own work, we know that their work can fill their hungry mouths. When it isn't necessary to work in order to fill a hungry mouth, much less work will be done. Yeah. It's not good for us to not work. So, an ungodly man digs up evil. The sense is that for the ungodly man, the evil he casually finds isn't enough to satisfy his desire. He digs up evil, finding the effort to pursue evil. Dug up evil. A wicked man labors as much to bring about an evil purpose as the quarryman does to dig up stones, from Clark. John Trapp relates how the enemies of both Augustine and Beza dug up their old sins and tried to discredit them on account of those sins. It is on his lips like a burning fire. When an ungodly man digs up evil, he can't keep it to himself. He has to spread it to others, so he casts it from his lips as if it were a burning fire. What he finds, he spreads. His speech is like scorching fire. The simile speaks of the devastating effect of his words, from Ross. Yeah. Reminds me of the flaming darts of the evil one. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day.